good evening, Galion, and welcome to Facebook Live. It's great to be here again. I'm Mayor Tom O'Leary, and we're meeting with you and here to speak with you and answer questions the night before council meetings. I think this will be the last monologue, if you will, from the mayor in these Facebook Live sessions. So beginning next month, we'll begin to invite city council members or other elected officials or people who are prominent within city government to come and spend some time answering questions and allowing the public to get to know them just a little bit better. So in that connection, if you check our Facebook site or our city website and have any suggestions about what elected official or department head you would like to hear from and what kinds of questions you'd like to hear answered from those individuals, we'll start scheduling that and make this much more than just the mayor monologuing about city issues. But tonight, you're lucky enough that I'm going to monologue for a few minutes before questions roll in. I'm going to talk about a topic that really makes Galion different from other small communities, and that's our Freeze Foundation endowment. I think people have heard about the Freeze funds and are aware somewhat of the kinds of projects that have been funded with the Freeze funds, but I'm going to spend just a few minutes tonight talking about how those dollars are governed and what we're attempting to do, I think, over the short term and the long term with Freeze dollars. You know, one of the good things about this past year, regardless of your politics, is that the stock market had an exceptional year. And as a result of that, the Freeze Foundation had quite a successful year in earnings. So I had an opportunity recently to look at their income statement and feel excited about what we have next year in terms of available funds for the Freeze Foundation. So some of the projects that we wouldn't consider if the income to the city was in the $200,000 range, or projects that we wouldn't consider unless we had $500,000 or $600,000, now come back on the table, and we're going to think about doing some things in the community that haven't been done before with those Freeze funds, and really soliciting projects from those eligible 501c3s throughout the community, and certainly making sure that the school district, which continues to be an eligible applicant for Freeze funds, is aware of what we hope to be a sizable 2018 allocation. What kind of projects am I talking about? Well, for a few years, we've been pursuing, as a city, we've been pursuing funds through the state to create a hiker path within the community. You know, I think really for people who walk and people who are bicyclists, the on-road or the side-of-the-road experience is really not the kind of bicycling that is as safe and as enjoyable for people of all ages as it's what we've envisioned for a few years. So one of the projects that I hope to bring in front of City Council and seek approval on is some sort of beginning to a bike path that ultimately would run from Amix Reservoir out to Pico Park. So that is something that I think I would like to generate some initial discussion on and see the kind of feedback within council or throughout the community to at least get an initial segment built. So future applications for state funds will be more competitive. What we've learned is that the state's really not in the business of starting these recreational trails from literally from square one or foot one, and so it's really come pretty apparent to people at City Hall that we're going to need to do something in really getting it started instead of just talking about it or having a plan on paper. Another big project that I've heard discussed throughout the community and certain members of the advisory board, which helps council decide which projects are best suited for the community, is a large playground installation. And so I'm sure there'll be, over the next several months, discussion about what kind of project, how much money should be involved, and certainly where should that project be located. So in mentioning the Freeze dollars, I'm really trying to spark people's interest and attention and get some discussion going about what would be projects for 2018 that may stretch into 2019. But again, with the stock market and up and the earnings of the Freeze Foundation the being up as well, I think that puts us in a position to think big in terms of freeze projects for 2018. And certainly I'm of the school of thought that we need to utilize that foundation to build projects in the community that really make a difference going forward. So I think that's really an important discussion that's going to begin to happen. I know the schools have an agenda in terms of recreational facilities, and with the new educational services district that council just put in place at the last meeting, I think that you'll begin to see some tangible activity out at the school campus in terms of projects that may in part be freeze related. Second topic that's parks related that I want to spend a little bit of time talking about, and then see if we have some questions and can generate some give and take here this evening, is this afternoon Parks Chairperson Shirley Clark was going to post sort of a notice to the community that at this point East Park is without a tenant this summer. So while that had for many, many years been the location for men's softball in this community, this will be, I believe, at least the second consecutive year without a men's league that's active in the community at this point. So either a call to those people who would like to see men's softball back out at East Park, or another type use of that field, perhaps a church league, something along those lines. I know Shirley was going to put that call out and try to see what kind of support was out within the community to see that East Park softball field more actively used. So those are a couple of parks related topics that I think are important, and really trying to get the conversation going in the community about a next round of high impact freeze projects, a bridge spanning Ammons Amix, starting the trail, the bike trail, some improvements through city-owned property, kind of between the treatment plant and Pizza Hut, that area back along the Olentangy, and then new parks equipment. And certainly we're going to continue moving down the road of building modern handicap accessible restroom facilities throughout our park system. So sort of a summary on parks. Something that just another topic worth spending a moment or two mentioning is last week we had a bid opening. One of the large sewers that collects a lot of sewage around the town from the north side and across to the treatment plant over off of Hosford Road is scheduled for a major replacement. We had a section that really needs to be replaced, and so we were pleased last week to have bids that were significantly under the engineer's estimate, and we're excited to be about being able to award that and get that project put in place. It's one of those types of public works projects that you don't appreciate until something goes wrong, and then you've got problems with your sewage collection system. So it's really maybe not a good dinner time talk, but it's essential. One of the things that the city handles on a daily basis that's I think worth noting. Let me hit one other topic and then see if we have any questions. We had several years ago, 3-4 years ago, came to our attention up here at City Hall that there was a pretty significant difference between the number of gallons that we treat ready for consumption at the filtration plant on Railroad Street and the amount of water that we sell on a daily basis. And this loss of treated water was something that was expensive because it took us extra manpower to produce the water, certainly extra chemicals to treat it, and then we had this loss of water throughout the community. So we began a process of literally listening to the water lines and identifying where the leakage is. And we made significant impact on the amount of water that we're losing, and it gives us hope that we will be able to reduce some of the costs. In fact, we're looking at further reductions in that water loss that will allow us to have greater reservoir capacity, and certainly water that we don't need to treat will save us on chemical costs and perhaps in the long run on labor costs as well. So a project that is, again, in the subsurface utilities and the water utility. We're identifying leaks that have been in our system for a while and making it a point of emphasis to get those leaks replaced. So whether it's water collection or distribution rather, or sewage collection, there's been some major improvements there that I suppose if I didn't tell you about them you wouldn't know, but it has made our system tighter in that regard in terms of water leaking out, and we're excited about making those incremental improvements in what's now known as infrastructure. Used to be water and sewer lines, but now it's infrastructure. So, those are 3 or 4 things that are going on at City Hall right now, and I'm not sure if we've sparked any questions on those topics or anything else.
Yes, Mayor, we had 2 questions come in this evening. The first is from Crystal, and it relates to I'm guessing, the school's plans for the property that they've purchased around the school campus. She just wants to know, what is the plan the school has?
Well, I think the best answer to that, it would be to just take a moment or two and contact the plan. Or contact the school. There is a plan. There's a map. And then there's a discussion, a sequencing of projects that the schools intends on building. And I think on the front end of that, without speaking too much for the schools, there's a transportation center, a bus garage, if you will, and then a desire to put in a more permanent soccer field with ultimately, or in the next phase, a regulation track. That the school sees an important part about building part of them building out their soccer and their track program. So my best recommendation is to get a hold of the schools. There is a map. There has been 2 or 3 public meetings discussing it, and now that it's zoned so that it can be used for these kinds of activities, I think the best place to find out what their agenda is through direct contact with school board members or with the people at the administration building.
Okay. Our next question, comes from Chris, and it's, why did the men's softball league go away?
Well, I think it's from what I know about it, the city was in the middle of a operating agreement, a lease, if you will, a use agreement. And at the end of one year, some of the management or leadership of the league decided they were done with it, asked any of the other interested players if they wanted to take it over, and at that point there really was no one who was able to take over the league. So I can't speak for whether they'll start from scratch financially or exactly what happened, but I can tell you that it's been a tradition for a long time in Galion to either use the East Park field going back in the 60s and 70s, and then certainly once Pico was built, that it was the home of men's softball for a few years before we hit our financial collapse. So I'm really not sure why it fell apart or failed to reappear last year, but I am quite interested in seeing if there's some folks interested and they can find the necessary sponsorship, and the city would work as they have in the past to bring the field into playing shape and maintain it throughout the summer. I think it really is now that you have the splash park there, it really lends itself to, or sets itself up for sort of a fun place for the kids to go play in the splash park in a safe, fenced-in area, and Dad can play softball, and Mom can split her attention between supervising Dad over at the softball field and keep an eye on the kids at the splash park. So I don't know what happened to it, but I am very interested in seeing what the city can do to get activity out there during the evenings in the summertime.
Okay. Mayor, our next question comes from Crystal. I think it goes back to what you spoke to earlier about examining some of the water lines and finding some issues. And her question is, once the leakage of water is fixed, how will it reflect on our utility bills?
Well, I think what it certainly can do is be a hedge against any further future increases. Whether or not it result in additional rate reductions. I think sometimes people forget that there was about a 15% decrease in overall revenue to the city, and those rate reductions were really concentrated in the lower end users. So meaning lower end as in low consumption users. So we've lowered water bills back in 2015 and haven't had to raise them. But Crystal, I think, is on to the main point of it, that if you reduce your costs, and our three big costs in producing water are electric, the pumps that run to treat the water and get the water into the distribution system, the chemicals needed for that treatment, and then the labor needed to bring those that raw water into a potable condition. And so if one of the two major areas that aren't personnel related would really benefit by tightening this up, because you wouldn't have to make as much water, use the pumps less frequently, and we certainly would use fewer chemicals. So I sure as heck think if as we continue to track down these leaks, we'll at least be able to push back in time any rate increases. And although some people would not necessarily agree, I'm really of the school of thought that we keep the utility rates as low as possible rather than raising them so that we have surpluses that are on hand if we need them for an emergency. So I'm very much in favor of keeping the water rates down. And that's part of the reason we went out looking for this loss of water, because we knew it was literally money running down the drain or back into the streams that go back to the reservoirs. So.
Okay, and our final question tonight, Mayor, comes from Heath, related to the Duke Station.
Mm-hmm.
Will we be seeing progress with the Duke Station project in the near future?
Well, I think they got, yes, I hope, is the answer. We're not really in control of it, and I think they had some major fiber optic relocation that had to be accomplished. That's what slowed the project down for weeks and weeks. And then I think this winter is more like the traditional winters that we got a little bit spoiled about. So the construction that's going on there really has been hampered by the weather. We were fully expecting them to come into full construction and renovation once the weather changes. So it has been a little frustrating that they got the demo done and nothing else has happened. But I remain optimistic. They've got a major investment, and I remain optimistic that it'll start taking shape early in the spring, late winter, early spring. So before we close, I just want to make a quick comment about the effort that's been put out by our service department in the 2 or 3 storms we've had lately. I'm get very much involved. I don't micromanage the way we handle events, but I get out in the community and on the streets, and where we've not done as well as maybe in some ways we'd like to, it sure hasn't been for lack of effort. And so one of the things that we're looking at going forward is making sure that they have, meaning the department has the right tools and equipment to really go toe-to-toe with ODOT and the better funded, larger snow removal operations. So we're looking at some of the things that ODOT does to treat the roads, not necessarily pre-treat, but to get some calcium on the salt so it will act along a broader range of temperatures, and also make sure we have the right kind of equipment for our handful of ice and snow folks to get out there and do a good job for the community. So we put in a lot of effort. We're going to continue to be out there whenever the snow is out there, and hope to work closely with the schools and other key responders to make sure that safety forces can get where they're going and school kids can get to and from school. So really working hard at that. I commend them for the efforts, and any of the shortcomings that I've seen on the city's part really have to do with getting the right equipment and allowing our manpower to have the right materials and equipment to do that top flight job of snow removal that I'm sure everyone in the community expects and deserves to have. So thanks again for listening tonight. In a few weeks before the first council meeting in February, I don't know if we'll draw a hat for a council member, elected official, but we'll begin to rotate the talking head on these Facebook Live episodes, and hope to continue the conversation and further introduction of people working for you at City Hall. So good night.